My parents gave my brother everything: the business, the money, the future I built with my own hands. And they called me greedy for asking for a single penny. My name is Riley, and I am going to tell you the story of how my family broke me and how I rebuilt myself into something they never saw coming. Let me start at the beginning. I grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. My parents, Harold and Margaret, started a hardware business from nothing. Literally nothing. My father was a carpenter who saved every penny he earned from building decks and fixing fences. My mother was a bookkeeper for a local grocery store. They bought a tiny, rundown shop on a cracked asphalt road, and they worked 18 hours a day to turn it into something respectable. I remember sleeping on a pile of burlap sacks in the back office while my mother balanced the ledgers by the light of a single bulb. I remember the smell of sawdust and coffee and the sound of my father humming old country songs while he stacked lumber. When my brother Noah was born, I was 5 years old. I loved him the way only a big sister can love a little brother. I thought his chubby hands were magic. I thought his laugh was the best sound in the world. And my parents, they loved him too. Of course they did. But there was a difference. With me, love was a quiet thing. It was a pat on the head, a nod of approval, a whispered good job when I brought home straight A's. With Noah, love was loud. It was parades and parties and promises. It was my father lifting him onto his shoulders and declaring to the whole shop, "This boy is going to run this empire one day." I didn't mind at first. I was a girl who believed in fairness, but I also believed in tradition. I told myself that my parents were just old-fashioned, that they didn't mean to overlook me, that my time would come, so I worked. I worked harder than anyone. When I was 15, I started managing the inventory system because my mother kept messing up the counts. When I was 17, I redesigned the entire store layout, and sales went up by 30%. My father shook my hand and said, "Good work, Riley." That was it, a handshake. But when Noah stacked a few boxes in the wrong aisle and my father saw him, he hugged him and said, "That's my boy. He's got the touch." I swallowed the bitterness. I told myself it was just a hug. When I graduated high school, I had scholarships to Ohio State for business management. But my father came to me with tears in his eyes and said, "Riley, we need you here. The business is growing, and we can't afford to hire the help we need. Stay 1 year, just 1 year. Help us build this, and then you can go to college. I promise I will make it up to you." I stayed. I postponed my dreams because I believed in his promise. I worked 60 hours a week. I learned every supplier's name. I memorized every price, every discount, every trick of the trade. I built a website for the store when no one else in town had one. I brought in online orders from 3 counties away. The business doubled in that 1 year, then it doubled again. And Noah. Noah was in high school, playing football and failing math. My parents hired tutors for him. They bought him a car. They told him not to worry about the business, that he had plenty of time to learn. He was the golden child, and I was the workhorse. That was the unspoken agreement in our family. I would build the kingdom, and he would inherit it, but I still believed. I believed that when the time came, my parents would see the truth. They would see that I had given my blood and my sweat and my youth to this company. They would divide things fairly. They loved me, didn't they? Let me fast forward a few years. I am 26 years old. I have never gone to college. I have never taken a vacation. I have never dated seriously because there was always another shipment to check, another payroll to run, another problem to solve. The hardware business, which started as a dusty little shop, is now a regional chain with 5 locations and a warehouse. We employ over 100 people. My father is the face of the company, my mother runs the finances, Noah is a manager at one of the stores, and I am the operations director. That is my title, but my job is everything. I do logistics, marketing, human resources, vendor negotiations, and strategy. I am the engine of this machine. Noah, meanwhile, is 21 years old. He dropped out of community college twice. He has a nice smile and a way with customers, but he has no idea how to run a business. He shows up late, leaves early, and spends most of his time in the break room watching videos on his phone. My parents see this and they tell me, "He's young, he'll grow into it." I am 3 years younger than Noah was at that age, but I never got to be young. I never got to grow into anything. I was born grown. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a rainy Tuesday in October. My father called a family meeting at the main store after closing time. He said he had an important announcement. I thought maybe he was retiring. I thought maybe he was finally going to name me CEO or at least give me a proper ownership stake. I had been dreaming of that moment for years. I had rehearsed what I would say. I would be humble. I would thank them. I would promise to take the company even further. We sat in the back office, the same room where I used to sleep on burlap sacks. Now it had leather chairs and a mahogany desk. My mother poured coffee. My father cleared his throat. Noah leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed, looking bored. My father said, "I've decided to retire at the end of this year, and I've decided to give the business to Noah." The room went silent. I heard the rain tapping on the window. I heard my own heartbeat. I waited for the rest of the sentence. I waited for him to say, "And Riley will get this share, or we'll divide it equally, or even Riley will be the vice president." I waited. The silence stretched. Then my mother said, "Noah is the son. It's only right that the business stays in the male line. You understand, Riley? You're a smart girl. You'll find your own path." I looked at Noah. He was smiling. Not a mean smile exactly. A relieved smile. A smile that said, "See, I told you it would work out." I said, "What do I get?" My father looked uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair and said, "We'll give you a severance package, a year's salary. And you have our blessing to do whatever you want." A year's salary. After 15 years of building this company from a shack to an empire. After sacrificing my education, my social life, my relationships, my health. After working through holidays and birthdays and funerals. After I had made them rich beyond their wildest dreams. I said, "That's it." My mother's voice turned cold. She said, "Riley, don't be greedy. We raised you better than that. Noah is your brother. This is his birthright. You'll always have a place in this family, but the business is not for you." That word hit me like a slap. Greedy. I was greedy for asking for what I had earned, while Noah, who had done nothing, was getting everything. And he wasn't greedy, he was just the son. I looked at my father. I said, "Dad, please. I have given everything to this company. I have never asked for anything. Just give me a fair share. 30%, 20, 10, anything." My father would not meet my eyes. He said, "I'm sorry, Riley, my mind is made up." Noah spoke then. He said, "Riley, don't make this weird. You know I'll take care of you. I'll give you a job if you want. You can manage one of the stores." He offered me a job at the company I had built. He offered to let me manage a store, like I was some random applicant off the street. Like I hadn't taught him how to tie his shoes. I stood up. My chair scraped the floor. I said, "You are going to regret this." My mother said, "Is that a threat, Riley?" I said, "No. It's a promise." I walked out of that office, out of the store, into the rain. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a long time with the rain pounding on the roof. I felt something inside me crack, and then I felt something else, something harder, something colder, a quiet voice in my head that said, "You are done being the good daughter." I went home that night and I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and a pen, and I wrote down everything I knew, every supplier contract, every vendor discount, every customer list, every employee strength and weakness, every tax loophole, every debt, every secret my parents had ever told me about their finances. I wrote for 8 hours straight. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. The first thing I did was nothing. I went to work the next day like nothing had happened. I smiled at my parents. I said good morning to Noah. I answered emails. I attended meetings. I was the perfect employee. They watched me carefully for a few days, waiting for me to make a scene. But I didn't. I just kept working. And slowly, they relaxed. They thought I had accepted my fate. They thought I was being mature about it. They had no idea what was coming. You see, over the 15 years I had worked for my family, I had never signed a non-compete agreement. I had never signed an employment contract. I was paid under the table for the first 5 years, and after that, I was just a salaried employee with no legal restrictions. My parents were old school. They trusted me. They never thought I would leave, let alone compete. But I was going to leave, and I was going to compete, and I was going to win. I spent the next 3 months preparing in secret. I opened a new bank account at a credit union my parents didn't use. I met with a lawyer who specialized in business law. I told her everything. She laughed when I finished. She said, "Your family has no idea what they've done. You have the leverage here, you just have to be patient." I was patient. I was very patient. Let me explain clearly, step by step, exactly how I took my revenge. Every move was calculated. Every move was legal. And every move was designed to bring down the empire I had built, so I could rebuild it for myself. Number step 1. Securing suppliers. I started with the suppliers. Over the years, I had built personal relationships with every major vendor our company used. I had negotiated every contract. I had saved our company millions of dollars, and those suppliers liked me. They trusted me. When I called them and said, "I am starting my own hardware business, and I would like to discuss pricing," most of them were happy to talk. I scheduled private meetings with each supplier. I drove to their offices or met them at coffee shops outside of town where no one would see us. I brought my notebook. I showed them my business plan. I told them my story. Not all of them stayed with me. Some were loyal to my father. But most of them knew the truth. They knew I was the one who paid invoices on time. They knew I was the one who never argued about shipping damages. They knew I was the one who ordered accurately and never caused headaches. One supplier, an older man named Mr. Henderson, who had been in the business for 40 years, looked at me across his desk and said, "Riley, I've watched you grow up. I've watched you run circles around your father. When you open your doors, I will give you better prices than I give anyone else. And I will not tell your family." Some suppliers even offered me exclusive products that my family's business could not get. One lumber company gave me a special discount of 15% below what my parents were paying. That alone was enough to undercut their prices significantly. Within 2 months, I had secured supply agreements for everything from lumber to nails to power tools. I had better prices and better terms than my family's business. I was already winning, and they didn't even know I was playing. Number step 2, winning customers. Next, I went after the customers. This was delicate. I couldn't just steal the customer list. That would be illegal, but I didn't need to steal it. I had built that list. I had called every single one of those customers at some point. I knew their names, their businesses, their preferences. I knew that Tom, the contractor, hated waiting in line. I knew that Maria, the landlord, wanted bulk discounts on paint. I knew that the high school needed a special order of tools for their shop class every spring. So I started having lunches, casual lunches. I would call a customer and say, "I'm leaving the family business to start my own company. I'd love to buy you lunch and tell you about it." Almost everyone said yes. And at those lunches, I didn't pressure anyone. I just told them my story. I told them about the 15 years of work. I told them about my parents giving everything to my brother. I told them about my new business, which would have lower prices, better service, and free delivery for contractors. People were angry on my behalf. People wanted to help me. One contractor named Dave, who had been a customer for 20 years, slammed his fist on the table and said, "Your parents should be ashamed. I'm switching to you on day 1, and I'm bringing my 3 brothers with me." Another customer, a property management company that bought thousands of dollars of paint and supplies every month, told me they had been frustrated with Noah's incompetence for years. They said they had been looking for an excuse to leave. I gave them that excuse. By the end of the 3rd month, I had verbal commitments from 40% of my family's largest customers. They agreed to switch to my company as soon as I opened my doors. But I didn't stop there. I also started reaching out to new customers that my family had never bothered to pursue. I found small construction companies, independent handymen, and even homeowners who had complained about my family's high prices. I built a mailing list of over 500 potential customers before I even had a store. Number step 3, poaching key employees. Then I went after the employees. This was the hardest part. Some of these people had worked for my family for decades. They were loyal, but they were also frustrated. They saw Noah's incompetence. They saw how I was treated. They knew the truth, so I started having quiet conversations. I would ask a trusted employee to meet me after work at a diner across town. I would buy them coffee. I would say, "I'm leaving. I'm starting my own business. I want you to come with me. I will pay you 20% more than you make now. I will give you health insurance. I will give you a retirement plan. And if you stay with me for 5 years, I will give you a small ownership stake in the company." I didn't poach everyone. I didn't need to, I just needed the best ones. The ones who knew how to run a store, how to treat a customer, how to fix a problem. 7 people said yes. 7 of the most talented, hardest-working people in the company agreed to leave with me, including the warehouse manager, a man named Carlos who knew every inch of the inventory system, including the head of deliveries, a woman named Jen who had every delivery route memorized, including the customer service manager, a young man named Marcus who had been passed over for a promotion because Noah wanted his friend to have the job. These 7 people became my core team. They helped me plan my launch. They helped me choose a location. They helped me recruit even more employees from outside the family business. By the time I opened my doors, I had a staff of 25 experienced, motivated, loyal people who believed in me. Step 4. Undermining their real estate. Finally, I went after the real estate. My parents owned their store locations, but they had mortgages on all of them. I knew this because I had helped my mother with the loan applications. I knew which banks held the notes. I knew the interest rates. I knew the maturity dates. And I knew that 2 of the locations were coming up for refinancing in the next 6 months. I called those banks. I introduced myself as Riley, the former operations director of the family business. I told them I was starting a new hardware company and I would be interested in leasing those properties if the current tenants defaulted. The bankers were intrigued. They knew my reputation. They knew I was reliable. They told me to stay in touch, but I didn't stop there. I also started spreading word among commercial real estate agents that I was looking for locations. I wanted to make sure that if my parents tried to sell their properties, they would have a hard time finding buyers. I didn't need to do anything illegal. I just needed to make sure that everyone in the local real estate market knew that I was the future of hardware in our town, and that my family's business was the past. Step 5. Building my own infrastructure. While I was doing all of this, I was also building my own business from the ground up. I leased a warehouse space on the outskirts of town. It was bigger than I needed, but I planned to grow. I hired a contractor to renovate it into a modern hardware store with a showroom, a warehouse, and office space. I bought shelving, cash registers, computers, and delivery trucks. I set up my own inventory system, better than the one my family used. I created a website with e-commerce capabilities. I hired a graphic designer to make a logo. I chose the name carefully, Riley's Hardware. Simple, honest. Mine. I also secured financing. I went to a small local bank that had always wanted to do business with me, but my father had refused to work with them because they were new. The bank manager, a woman named Patricia, listened to my story. She asked to see my business plan. I gave her a 50-page document I had spent weeks writing. She read it overnight. The next day, she approved a line of credit for $200,000. She said, "Riley, I'm not just investing in your business, I'm investing in you." I also used my own savings. I had been putting money aside for years, knowing that one day I might need to leave. I had $50,000 in a secret account. That became my down payment on the warehouse lease and my initial operating capital. By the time I was ready to make my move, I had everything: suppliers, customers, employees, financing, a location, a brand, a team. I had built a parallel universe to my family's business, and they had no idea it existed. I gave my 2 weeks' notice on a Monday morning. I walked into my father's office and placed a typed letter on his desk. He looked up at me with confusion. I said, "I'm resigning, effective in 2 weeks." He said, "Resigning? Riley, we're family. You can't resign from family." I said, "Watch me." He read the letter. His face turned red. He said, "Where are you going? What are you going to do?" I smiled. It was not a warm smile. I said, "I'm going to open my own hardware store, across the street from your main location." He stood up. He slammed his hand on the desk. He said, "You can't do that. That's illegal. That's stealing." I said, "It's not illegal. I have no non-compete. I have no contract. I am a free woman and I am going to compete. Fairly, honestly, and I am going to win." He called my mother. She came running. She read the letter. She started yelling. She said I was betraying the family. She said I was a traitor. She said I was selfish and cruel and that I would ruin my brother's future. I let her yell. I stood there calmly. When she finished, I said, "Mom, I asked for a fair share. You called me greedy. I asked for 10%. You gave me nothing. You made this decision, not me. Noah showed up. He looked scared. He said, Riley, come on. We can work something out. Don't do this to us. I looked at my little brother, the boy I had taught to tie his shoes, the boy I had protected from bullies, the boy who had never worked a day in his life but was getting everything I had built. I said, Noah, I love you. But love doesn't pay the bills, and you have had every advantage. You have had every chance. You have done nothing with it. I am done carrying you. I walked out of that office for the last time. I did not look back. The next 2 weeks were chaos for my family. They tried to stop me. They called their lawyer. He told them the same thing my lawyer had told me. Without a non-compete, there was nothing they could do. They tried to convince my suppliers to drop me. The suppliers said no. They tried to convince my customers to stay. The customers said no. They tried to convince my employees to remain loyal. The employees handed in their resignations. On my last day, Carlos, the warehouse manager, came to my desk and said, Riley, they don't know how to run the inventory system. I'm the only one who understands it. When I leave, they're going to be lost. I said, I know. He said, should I train someone before I go? I thought about it. I thought about my mother calling me greedy. I thought about my father refusing to meet my eyes. I thought about Noah's smile when he heard he was getting everything. I thought about the 15 years of sacrifice. I thought about the word greedy. I said, no, don't train anyone. Let them figure it out. He nodded. He understood. The day after I left, my parents called an emergency meeting. They offered me 40% of the business if I would come back. I said no. They offered 50%. I said no. They offered 60%. I said, you had your chance. You should have offered me something when I asked. Now it's too late. My mother started crying on the phone. She said, Riley, please, we're begging you, don't destroy us. I said, I'm not destroying you. You are destroying yourselves. I am just building something for me. If that destroys you, that's because you built your entire empire on my back. And when I stand up, you fall. I opened Riley's Hardware on a Saturday morning. The parking lot was full by 8 a.m. The contractor customers who had promised to switch showed up. The retail customers who had heard about my story through word of mouth showed up. Local news did a small story about the daughter who was wronged by her family and started her own business. People love an underdog. They love a comeback. They love to see justice served. My first month of sales exceeded my projections by 200%. My second month was even better. By the end of the first quarter, Riley's Hardware was profitable. By the end of the first year, I had opened a second location. I priced my products lower than my family's store. I offered free delivery. I offered a loyalty program. I offered weekend hours. I offered everything my parents had refused to offer because they said it would cut into their profits. And guess what? I still made plenty of profit because I ran my business efficiently, because I didn't have dead weight like Noah on my payroll, because I worked hard and I hired people who worked hard. My family, meanwhile, was falling apart. Without me, they didn't know how to run the business. Noah tried to step into my role, but he was lost. He didn't know the suppliers. He didn't know the pricing. He didn't know the logistics. The inventory system crashed because no one knew how to maintain it. Orders got delayed. Customers got angry. The employees who stayed were the ones no one else wanted. They were lazy or incompetent or both. My parents tried to hold things together, but they were old and tired. They had relied on me for so long that they had forgotten how to do the work themselves. My mother called me one night, crying. She said, Riley, please come back. We'll give you a share. We'll give you whatever you want. I said, Mom, it's too late. I have my own business now. I have my own family. My employees are my family. My customers are my family. You made your choice. You chose Noah. Now live with it. She said, but we're your real family. Blood is thicker than water. I said, that's not how the saying goes, Mom. The real saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds I've chosen are stronger than the bonds I was born into. Goodbye, I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Over the next 2 years, I watched my family's business collapse. It was slow at first, then fast. They lost their biggest customers to me. They lost their best remaining employees to me. They couldn't pay their mortgages. The banks called in their loans. They tried to sell the business, but no one wanted to buy a failing hardware chain with outdated systems and a bad reputation. I will explain exactly how the collapse happened, step by step, so you understand the full scope of the revenge. First, their revenue dropped by 60% within the first 8 months. Without their largest customers, they couldn't cover their operating costs. Their fixed expenses, rent, utilities, insurance, payroll, stayed the same, but their income plummeted. They started losing money every single month. Second, their suppliers started demanding cash on delivery because my parents had been slow to pay invoices after I left. Without me managing the accounts payable, my mother fell behind on payments. Suppliers who had trusted me for years lost trust in my parents. Some of them cut off credit entirely. My parents had to start paying for inventory upfront, which drained their cash reserves even faster. Third, their best employees left. After Carlos, the warehouse manager, quit, the inventory system fell apart. Orders were shipped late or shipped wrong. Customers complained. The few remaining good employees got frustrated and found jobs elsewhere, many of them with me. Within a year, my parents were left with a skeleton crew of unmotivated, unqualified workers. Fourth, their real estate became a problem. When the mortgages came up for refinancing, the banks looked at their financials and said no. Their credit was destroyed. Their debt was too high. Their revenue was too low. The banks called the loans due. My parents had to sell 2 of their 5 locations just to pay the banks back. They sold them at a loss to a developer who turned them into a parking lot. Fifth, their reputation was ruined. Word spread through the small town about how they had treated me. Customers who didn't even know me personally stopped shopping there because they didn't want to support a family that would cheat their own daughter. The local newspaper ran a follow-up story about my success and my family's failure. The headline was "The Daughter Who Built an Empire and the Family Who Lost It." My parents tried to sue the newspaper for defamation. They lost. By the end of the second year, my parents had closed 3 of their 5 locations. The remaining 2 were barely hanging on. They had laid off almost everyone. My mother went back to bookkeeping for a grocery store. My father tried to do carpentry again, but his hands were too old and his heart was too weak. My father had a heart attack, not a bad one, a warning. He was in the hospital for 3 days. I did not visit. My mother called to tell me. She said, "Your father is sick. You should come see him. He's your father." I said, "He stopped being my father the day he looked me in the eye and gave everything I built to my brother. I hope he gets better. But I am not coming." She called me a monster. She said I had no heart. She said I was worse than a stranger. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was a monster. But I was a monster they had created. I was a monster who had been patient and kind and hardworking for 15 years, only to be told that my gender made me less valuable than my lazy brother. I was a monster who had finally decided to stop being a doormat. If that made me a monster, then so be it. Noah came to see me at my store about 6 months before the end. He looked terrible. He had gained weight. His eyes were red. He had been drinking, I could tell. He stood in the middle of my showroom, surrounded by products that used to be in his family's store, and he looked lost. He said, "Riley, please, I'm begging you, buy us out. Take the business. Give us something. Mom and Dad are going to lose the house. They're going to lose everything." I looked at my brother, the golden child, the heir, the son, and I felt something I didn't expect. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a deep, quiet sadness. Sadness for what we had lost. Sadness for the family that could have been. I said, "Noah, I will buy the business, but I will buy it at liquidation value. I will not pay a premium. I will not save you. I will take what I want and leave the rest." He said, "That's cruel." I said, "No, cruel was giving everything to you and nothing to me. Cruel was calling me greedy for asking for my fair share. Cruel was 15 years of watching you fail upward while I worked myself into the ground. This is not cruel. This is business. You wanted to run a business. Now you're learning how business works." He started to cry, big, ugly sobs. He said, "I'm sorry, Riley. I'm so sorry. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to be the favorite. I just didn't know how to say no." I believed him. I believed that he didn't ask for it, but that didn't matter. He had taken it. He had enjoyed it. He had never once stood up for me. He had never once said to our parents, "Give Riley her share." He had sat in that leather chair and smiled when they handed him everything, and that was something I could not forgive. I said, "Noah, I forgive you, but I don't trust you, and I don't owe you anything. Send me the paperwork. I'll make an offer, take it or leave it." He left. He walked out of my store with his shoulders slumped. I watched him go. And then I went back to work, because that's what I do. I work. The family business filed for bankruptcy 14 months after I left. My parents lost 3 of their 5 locations. They kept the original store, the little one on the cracked asphalt road, but it was barely surviving. They had to lay off almost everyone. My mother went back to bookkeeping for a grocery store. My father tried to do carpentry again, but his hands were too old and his heart was too weak. I made an offer to buy the remaining assets of the business. I offered $100,000. It was a fair price for what was left. My parents had no choice but to accept. I bought the inventory, the equipment, the customer list, and the rights to the original business name. I paid using a check from my business account. I handed it to my father in person because I wanted him to see my face when he took my money. He looked at the check. He looked at me. He said, "You've won, Riley. Are you happy?" I said, "I'm not happy, Dad. I'm just not sad anymore. There's a difference." I took the original store's sign down with my own hands. I replaced it with a sign that said, "Riley's Hardware, established 2020. The original business had been founded in 1985, but I didn't put that date on my sign. Because that business was dead. This was my business, my name, my work, my victory. I turned the original store into a community workshop. I offer free classes on home repair, woodworking, and tool safety. I hire local high school students as interns. I donate supplies to the high school shop class. I have turned the place where I slept on burlap sacks into a place where young people learn and grow. That is my final revenge. Not destruction, transformation. My mother tried to reach out one more time. It was Christmas. She sent me a letter, a handwritten letter on old-fashioned stationery. She wrote about how she missed me, how the holidays weren't the same, how she wished we could put the past behind us and be a family again. She wrote, "We made mistakes. We were wrong, but we are your parents. You only get one mother and one father. Please don't throw us away." I read that letter 3 times. I thought about the little girl who slept on burlap sacks. I thought about the teenager who gave up college. I thought about the young woman who built an empire and was told she wasn't worthy of it. I thought about the word greedy. And then I wrote back. I wrote one sentence. I said, "You threw me away first." I never heard from her again. So here I am now. I am 31 years old. I own a successful hardware chain with 6 locations. I employ over 200 people. I pay them well. I treat them fairly. I give them ownership stakes and profit sharing and real opportunities to grow. My employees don't leave me. They stay. They tell me I'm the best boss they've ever had. And that means more to me than any inheritance ever could. I have a life now. I have friends. I have hobbies. I take vacations. I went back to school part-time and finished my degree in business management. I walked across that stage and I cried, not because I was sad, but because I had finally done something for myself. Not for my family, not for the business. For me, I don't hate my parents anymore. Hate takes too much energy. I don't hate Noah either. I feel something closer to indifference. They are strangers to me now. People I used to know. People who taught me a valuable lesson. That blood means nothing if it's not backed by respect. That family is not about who shares your DNA. Family is about who shows up for you, who fights for you, who sees you. I have a new family now. My employees, my customers, my friends. The woman who runs the coffee shop next to my main store, who brings me a latte every morning without me asking. The elderly contractor who switched to my company on day 1 and has never looked back. The young single mother who works in my warehouse and just bought her first house because of the down payment assistance I gave her. That is my family. Those are my people. Sometimes, late at night, I drive past the old store. The original one, I see the lights on. I see my father moving slowly behind the counter. I see my mother hunched over the register. The store is shabby now. The paint is peeling. The sign is faded. It looks like it did when I was a child, before I built it into something great. It has returned to its original state. A small, sad, struggling hardware store on a cracked asphalt road. I don't feel joy when I see it. I don't feel triumph. I feel a quiet sense of closure. The circle is complete. They had everything and they lost it. I had nothing and I built everything. The universe has a way of balancing itself out. Not because of karma or fate or God. Because of choices. They made their choice. I made mine. And I am at peace with mine. If you are listening to my story and you are in a situation where you are being overlooked, undervalued, or dismissed by the people who are supposed to love you, I want you to hear this. You are not greedy for wanting what you have earned. You are not selfish for asking to be seen. You are not a traitor for leaving a situation that is killing you. You have the right to build your own table if they won't give you a seat at theirs. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to be vengeful. You just have to be brave. Brave enough to leave. Brave enough to start over. Brave enough to believe that you are worth more than the scraps they throw you. Let me tell you exactly how I took my revenge, one more time, in the clearest way possible. I used my knowledge of the business. I secured better suppliers. I won over the best customers. I hired away the key employees. I undermined their real estate. I built my own infrastructure. I opened across the street. I priced lower and served better. I let their own incompetence destroy them. I did nothing illegal. I did nothing immoral. I simply competed and I won, because I was better, because I had always been better, and because they had spent 15 years taking me for granted. That is how you take revenge without becoming a villain. You don't steal, you don't cheat, you don't lie, you simply become so successful that their failure is a natural consequence of their own choices. You build something so strong that their weakness is exposed. You shine so bright that their darkness is revealed. My name is Riley. I am not a victim. I am not a hero. I am a woman who was told she was not enough, and I decided to prove them wrong. Not for their sake, for mine, and that is the story. That is the revenge, not the fall of my family's business. Not the tears or the bankruptcy or the heart attacks. The revenge is that I am happy, truly, deeply, irrevocably happy. I wake up every morning excited for the day ahead. I go to bed every night proud of what I have done. I have no regrets, I have no what-ifs, I have no bitterness eating away at my soul. My parents tried to break me. They tried to make me small. They tried to convince me that I was less because I was a daughter and not a son. And they failed. They failed because I refused to believe them. I refused to accept their version of my story. I wrote my own story. And in my story, the daughter wins. So if you ever find yourself in the hardware store that bears my name, look for the woman behind the counter. That's me. I'll be smiling, not because I am gloating, because I am free. And freedom, my friend, is the best revenge of all.